Okay, so you open your bank account, look on the app, and it's like $42.19 or whatever the abysmal amount is. And you know it's not enough that's going to get you through everything, that you know that you have to pay bills, everything. And just that feeling of being a failure just kind of comes over you. Yeah, I've been there. I don't know anyone who's in adulthood who hasn't been there. And it's just a yucky feeling. And that's why we're going to talk about budgeting, which I know that word, it just brings up images of, big messy spreadsheets maybe, or just this super taxing and time consuming thing. And guess what? That's not what I'm talking about. We have to really get down to the basics. And I'm talking about, let's talk about budgeting because I'm just sick of feeling broke and I'm over it. That's why we're going to talk about budgeting and we're going to make it real life and let's break it down. Okay, so first, things about money is definitely one of the top areas that we get questions on by far. It's where we get most of our ask us anything questions tend to be about money and just hear about it. And it's just kind of like you go out there and you see that there's these things on how to make a budget, but you're like, okay, I'm already so far behind and I feel so overwhelmed. And it feels like budget is for people who are someplace different than I'm at. And I totally understand how you can feel that way. But really it's not. It's even for you and maybe even most important for you if you're feeling like I'm already so far behind, I don't have anything to budget because we're going to switch up what it actually means to budget and what that's really getting down to. And you know what? I encourage you to come up with your own word for it because budgeting is just like the B word and we don't like it. And so come up with your own. But the really important thing about budgeting isn't like, okay, now here's all my money and I have this left over amount of money. So then, therefore, I can, budget that. Budget is really about creating a map. It's not a way or a reason that you go through and it's to beat yourself up or to feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to get out from underneath this, especially if you feel underpaid and overwhelmed, right? So it's a map. And if you feel broke, it's the best place to start because what it does is a budget just starts to give you visibility. And when you can look at your problem, you can start to solve it. But I guarantee you one thing, and in this life, if we're not willing to look at the problem, then we're not going to be able to solve it because we got to be able to see it to solve it. And so the biggest thing with budgeting is starting at where you are. And a lot of times it feels like the tools and resources out there and the conversations about budgeting starting off someplace different from where you're at. And that's why we want to take a real look at, even if you feel completely behind, you feel like you're not making enough money to cover things, you're lucky to be kind of living paycheck to paycheck, or you're just squeaking by and it just feels really stressful, then that's where you start. And you don't have to wait until you have extra money to budget. That's what budgeting is about, is saying, okay, this is where I'm at, and I need to get more visibility and clarity to my situation, right? Not where I think I'm going to be in, you know, a year from now or when I get that raise or whatever it is. It's about now. And it's just, I want you to think about budgeting as observing. That's the first step of budgeting, which is really just observing. And the best way to do that is to write everything down. So if you just take a week, maybe you start with a day, but you just really, a budgeting means I'm going to write down what I make. I'm going to write down what I spend. I'm going to write down things that I've committed spend to. i.e. subscriptions that I know is going to come due. And all you're doing is starting to observe and write down what you're spending, and then also the money that you're bringing in. And that really just, and you can do it in your notes app. You can do it on a piece of paper. This does not have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a big thing, because the first step is just getting in that place where you can really just start to observe the money that you're spending. And then in that process, when you're going through, you can kind of take a look at the things that you're spending money on and say, and what are the things that are really essential? And what are the things that are kind of nice to haves? And then when you start to spread those things out, you start to get different types of buckets of money. And that's where you get to go in and start to make decisions on, well, if I want to spend less or I want to spend differently, you now know kind of how you view what you're spending your money on. There's kind of the must-haves, maybe like rent and food, and maybe the nice-to-haves, like maybe some subscriptions or DoorDash fees, right? And there's no judgment here. It just is what it is, because it's where you're at. It's what you've already done. And then what you can do is, once you start to notice that, you can start to reframe that feeling of failure into, oh, I'm going to take some action now. Like, oh, there's some things I can do here. You can see that there are some subscriptions that you don't use that you can discontinue. You realize that maybe, oh, wow, I'm spending more on coffees than I thought, or whatever it is. Or maybe it's Amazon. Maybe you realize, like I did not so long ago, and said my do not buy list, I don't need any more pants. I'm not buying any more pants, right? But without the visibility and just taking the chance, the time to sit there and look at it, you're just going to constantly just feel behind, feel like a failure, and always think that taking action is for when you're in someplace different. And that just doesn't work well for us, right? Because you can take action from where you're at now. And this is money's a big area where a lot of shame comes up. Some really good mind games start to go on. And that's why, and I just am a big believer that when we write stuff down, we look at it and we just kind of look at the reality of it, it kind of makes some of those really negative voices go away, because it's just kind of putting it out there. Okay, here it is. Here it is. And then you can take some action. And we did a great video that talks about a really simple budget sheet. It includes it. I'll include the link to that sheet in these show notes. And we also, and I'll make sure you can, at the end here, you can click on that video, because it just kind of walks you through how to just start to observe that and jot that stuff down. And it's a great place to start. And that's how you start to get out of feeling broken, overwhelmed, and then being able to put a plan in place that gets you feeling like you've got some traction. And so if you're stuck, drop us a note. You can always ask us anything. I'll put a link to that as well in there, or put a question in the comments, and we'd love to hear it. But there you go. Just start where you're at, and you'll be amazed at how far you can go from where you're at, not waiting to get somewhere to take the actions. Until I see you again, stay happy and healthy.